you want to get. That's going to be your high quality saw timber, your big trees, your old trees. You want to get those to the mill, and that's also where you're going to get your highest dollar. The best we saw after Hugo was 50 cents on the dollar. Okay, let's say saw timber was 30 a ton. Because of the glut, it's 15 a ton. Okay. The lower end was 10 to 20 cents on the dollar, but if you got your land cleared and clean and ready to plant for the next rotation, that was a big factor. Think about the fire danger of 100 tons of wood laying out there because you didn't get a salvage cut, okay? You got to think about both sides of the coin. Yes, you're losing money compared to what the value of that timber was pre-Michael, but you've got a big fire danger for a number of years if you don't get it salvaged. So think about all your options. Moderate damage are those stands where you've probably got enough trees to thin back to, and that's a blessing. Those would be on the edge of the major part of the storm, probably a fair bit east of here. And light, we really don't need to do anything. Okay, I'll show you some examples. That is a bad situation. Okay. That is not good. Many of these trees that are leaning less than 45, they'll continue to live, but there's going to be some wood property problems, okay? So if possible, if we can salvage, cut that stand, there's really not enough quality trees out there to work with. What trees there are that are still living are on a bad lean angle. So we want to take care of those and get that stand cleaned up. This is another one where, again, probably not enough trees per acre to work with. So that would be a salvage clear cut, and you would start all over. Okay. This is what I would call light to moderate, where yes, there's some trees down. You're going to have to follow that stand. The first growing season, that would be 2019, starting the first of the warm weather in March and April. You want to make sure you don't get any beetle spots. Okay. So you're going to want to be out in those stands every 2 to 3 weeks. But this would be a low priority stand to get to because there's simply plenty of good trees to work with in that stand. Okay? The loggers are going to be extremely busy, and they're going to get to the ones that have that severe and catastrophic damage. This is one where it could be left alone, and you could log that after the big push the first year is over. This is a mixed pine hardwood, predominantly a hardwood stand, I would call. And again, are there enough trees of hardwoods of quality to work with? And the answer is pretty much no again. That would vary from landowner to landowner, obviously. But I think most of us would say we've got to go in there and try to do a salvage cut. Okay? All right. What do trees look like after any kind of strong wind event? Okay. Fork of trees, oftentimes trees that have been hit at a younger age. This tree was actually hit at a much younger age, and it wasn't a severe storm because he's got plenty of his buddies around him. But the terminals, when they're hit, you get two laterals and they fight for dominance, you end up with a forked tree. Not a big deal, it's still a tree, but it's only going to be pulpwood unless you've got a clean log or two below that fork. This is what we see a lot of, broken top trees, okay, after a hurricane. All right. If you have, we saw this with Hugo, we had a couple studies in South Carolina, and if you had at least 3 living branches on a tree, the tree would tend to live. Okay. It's not going to grow at a great rate of speed because it's lost most of its crown, but that was our rule of thumb, and it still seems to hold pretty true. Oklahoma State did a study, and they found the same thing, at least 3 living branches, and that tree will continue to live, but it's not going to do as good as it had the full crown. Lean trees, what will they do over time? This is where it gets iffy. It depends upon the strength of the hurricane when it gets to your property. But these older trees that are, let's say, 50, 60 feet tall and taller, they're going to lean and they're going to stay leaning. And as long as they're not on other trees, they're going to continue to live for a fair period of time. I've seen them live 5, 10 years. Okay? I've been following Matthew and Irma with lean trees, and they've lived 1 and 2 years. Matthew was 2 years ago, Irma was 1 year ago. This is a study area where a landowner, we've got a large study in here, but anyway, these were leaf trees to separate the brother and his 2 sisters' property, and these trees look exactly the same now as they did 2 years ago when Matthew came through. Okay? So lean trees of a height over 40 feet, they're pretty much going to live, but they're not going to straighten up. Okay, that's the way they're going to look. Okay. Young trees. How many of y'all got young stands that, yeah, they got a lot leaned over, but we don't have the damage that we do with these older stands, especially recently thin stands. If a stand was thin in the last 2 years, those tend to take the biggest brunt of the storm. Yeah, I see some heads shaking, yes. Well, anyway, the young stands, they're pretty resilient. This is a young longleaf stand over on the Warrenell Forest outside of Guyton. And this was Matthew evidence. And overall, the stand's in great condition. So I flagged a few trees here and there, documented different leans, and these trees have all straightened up. So the shorter the tree, the younger the tree, the higher the probability that thing's going to straighten up. Okay? Give it the growing season. Give it the full growing season of 19. And this is another study in Pembroke area where we've got different degrees of lean. Once they get over 45, it gets a little iffy on the lean. That's 45, greater than 45 from vertical, okay? And the taller that tree gets, the bigger the crown is typically, and the less likely it is going to be to straighten up, okay? So young trees have a good chance of straightening up, but once they get over 60 degrees, that means 2/3 of the way to the ground, about like that, they're probably not going to straighten up. If they do, they're going to have a sweep to them, and they're going to be a pulpwood tree. Okay. Another study where we've got, this was Matthew again, 1-year-old loblollies, and because they were doing this a lot, they actually dug a little hole on the side where the wind was coming from. These trees, believe it or not, they've all straightened up, every one of them. So young trees, it's a blessing. They're not way up there with big crowns where they're taking the brunt of the storm. They're down low, and they're going to be just fine. Just give it the growing season. Give it 2019. Uprooted trees, another big question. All right, this is a nice older stand of loblolly in Bullitt County. Matthew came through in early October. This picture was taken in the latter part of October. I followed these trees, and they had nice green crowns because they had a root system, and it was also dormant season. Remember, we're going into dormant season, so that's a blessing for wood decay. Wood decay is going to be a lot slower in dormancy than it is during the growing season. These trees all kept green tops until about April. So for the high value trees that have been uprooted, you've got till about mid-April to get them before they start to deteriorate. So about a 6-month window there for your high value trees. Try to get your high value trees out within a 6 months period from now. This is in a publication that was out there. I don't think I printed enough for everybody, but this is your timetable for pine and hardwood veneers. Just a short period of time. Pine dimension lumber, 3 to 4 months. Pine post, 4 to 6 weeks, and then your lesser value wood, pulpwood, fiberboard, particle board, and oriented strand board is 6 to 8 months. And your dimension lumber, as long as you don't get blue stain in it, and your bark starts to, before your bark starts to slough off, the wood should still be good to go to a sawmill. Once it starts sloughing off, then all bets are off for it to go to a sawmill. It's going to probably go to a pulp mill. Okay. The break point of these trees. I don't know whether we'll hit this first. Timetable for damaging insects and diseases for pines. That first growing season after, especially for stands that are mature, where there maybe was a salvage cut, but there was leaf trees. We want to look for bark beetle evidence. Okay. You really want to get out there about every 2 or 3 weeks, oaks and hickories, and then other hardwoods. But year one for pines especially is going to be real critical for those stands that have been adversely affected with your bark beetles. Okay. First 8 months, June to November, that's right now. Assess your stands, salvage your high value stands first, and then salvage the rest if possible. Okay. A lot of these stands, unfortunately, will probably not be salvaged. After Hugo, there was, I think, about 16% of the total tonnage on the ground was salvaged. I think the goal here is what, 20-25%, if possible, maybe more. June to October of next year, safely clean up anything that's left, and then site prep, mechanical and chemical. Make sure that you can get seedlings and planter lined up beforehand. Just remember the number of millions of acres that have been affected. All right, we're going to need 3+ years worth of seedlings that are produced in the southeast to plant all these acres. Okay, so year 2, if you can't get these site preps to do so, just do so in year 2. But make sure again you've got seedlings and the planter is committed. Okay, if you think about where these trees were broken. I'm going to go back to one of the slides. That's a good one. All right, a lot of these trees were broken with both Hugo and Michael at about 12 to 18 feet. So that first log, that first 16 feet is the most valuable part of the tree. So it's broken, so it's basically going to go to a pulp mill. Okay. The second log, because of the break, is probably going to go to a pulp mill as well. Because the sawmills that we saw after Hugo, they were not going to take any wood 8 feet from any visible evidence of cracking. Okay, so the first 2 logs are pretty much gone. That's your most valuable part of the tree. So a lot of these trees are going to go, even though they might be saw timber in size, they're probably going to go to the pulp mills because of the break point of these trees in the stand. Okay, all right, I think. Are there any questions? And we'll be here as long as need be.
The summary, is it not in this? Am I overlooking it? Your summary is very beneficial.
Well, that was pretty much it. If you want to, if anybody wants to email me, I can get you this PowerPoint. Is that pretty much what you're looking for?
Well, I saw most of it in the
Right.
handout, but
Right.
the summary, that last summary would
Okay.
be very beneficial in here. I didn't find it.
No, this was made yesterday. ddickens@uga.edu is my email. If you want to email me, I will turn this into a PDF file and email it to you. Okay.
Repeat your address again.
D as in David, and then Dickens@uga.edu.
David, if I could, this would be a good time. We are videotaping this. It will be available on YouTube for any of you that know how YouTube works. So if you miss anything here that you want to try to go back and say, did he say what I really think he said, you will be able to catch this and look at it again if you need to.
And what will be that?
Yes, ma'am.
What's the name of the YouTube so we can find it?
What's the name of YouTube, Wendy?
All right, it'll be linked on our website. If you just go to gatrees.org and select the Storm Damage Resources link, you'll see tons of resources. We'll try to get these presentations posted there as well, but you'll see a link to the video right there.
And to that point,
gatrees.org.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Our website, sort of the storm damage button is the first thing you see. It's got the timber damage assessment report on it. If you want to access it electronically in addition to the printed version, we're updating that site whenever we have information related to the storm damage that might be helpful to you.
I have emailed my forester and it's bounced off of email like 3 times, so is y'all's website fixed?
It is supposed to be up and running and whatnot. I will give you my card if you can give me whatever information you got.
I was trying to get up with Steve Martin and it bounced several times. I finally had to call and leave a message.
Okay, all right. Appreciate that feedback. We will
Check.
be looking into that before we leave here today.
The younger
Steve's emails working, so I emailed him last night, answered them.
When do we start back with prescribed burning and stuff?
That would be a GFC question.
You want to jump on that one? Describe
What was
burning.
it? I didn't hear the question,
The
I'm sorry.
younger stands, say 10 to 15 years old, that don't have
Get on
much
the mic.
damage, when do we start back with prescribed burning?
All right, the question was about younger stands, 10 to 15 years old. When do we start back with prescribed burning? That'll just be a stand by stand decision that would have to be made based on the amount of fuel on the ground. So it would certainly be something, you're right in considering that, as far as, when you would want to reintroduce it. You might want to reintroduce it maybe during the winter versus springtime when a lot of people burn. So that would be something that the Forestry Commission could come out and advise you on, and we could develop a burn plan for you if that was needed on the property. But I would handle it stand by stand on that based on the amount of fuel that's on the ground.
ma'am.
If you have 100 acres of timber that is not salvageable, what happens to it? What do you do? You've got trees that are cracked and down. What do you do with all that timber that's down?
Well, this is where a consulting forester that works the area that's reputable comes in handy big time. They know loggers, they know wood buyers, and if they know your property well, they also know what you have. And it's going to be, again, you know, the loggers are only going to be able to do so much within a 6 and 12 month period of time. I would try to get with a reputable consultant and have them come over and look at yours like they're going to do for everybody else, and see if it's it's possible that a logger would be interested to come and get your wood out before the bark starts sloughing off, is what I would do. That's the first thing I would do. And then if you've exhausted all those avenues, then there should be some reforestation money. How much per person, I don't know. But there should be reforestation money, and it's going to be for where no salvage operation has occurred. After Hugo, we did a couple different things. We did a D10, the biggest bulldozer made, unless there's a bigger one now, I don't know, but big V-blade on the front, and we basically V-bladed planting rows, and you could either plant right down the middle, or you could actually plant one row on one side right next to the pile of wood that was created with the V-blade, and then plant another one. That way you had access down the middle, and that's what we ended up going. This was actually on the Monks. There's a Monks property in Monks Corner in Berkeley County, and they have thousands of acres, and that's what we did on their property. And I'd love to go back and see it, because that was 1990 when that happened.
So you just left the trees they just left them?
We just a huge D10 with a 10-foot, 12-foot wide V-blade. The other option is do the old-fashioned shear, root rake, and pile or windrow. But you want to minimize topsoil getting into the pile of the windrow, because that's where your best soil is, that's where your nutrients are. We've gotten away from that, but with this level of debris, that's going to be another option. And hopefully there'll be enough for reforestation, because that is not cheap anymore either. Yes, sir. You have it.
Is there any hope for a small producer to get somebody in that to cut out timber?
Very little.
I mean, if I was I could cut timber, I would go to the big one.
Right. I think
Is there any hope for us?
again, I think it's a case-by-case call. If you've been in, let's say you developed a relationship with a local consultant, and again, they know what you have, that's going to be your...
So us small producers could walk out of here, okay?
I won't say that, but I would be calling up loggers and consultants and wood buyers and saying, here's what I've got, would you be interested in coming by? It's almost like selling anything else. I'd be on the phone big time. I'd be asking friends that have had a lot of wood cut.
Maybe Congressman
I done
could
asked
address
two or
the
three
small people.
and they said I wasn't
Have
big
any ideas for the small landowner?
We're the ones who are going to need it. Yeah.
I want to hear, and that's a good question. We know that that's the challenge, and so we're going to try to find a way to address it. Small landowners, absolutely.
Doesn't matter to me who answers it. I was told at the FSA office, if you're still under a CRP contract, no money for salvage and no money for replanting. Is that a possibility of changing?
There is a possibility, but I know that...
I know you can't promise.
Yeah, it's not a promise. I know that with the reforestry, what is it, the emergency reforestation...
You can sign up for damage, but not if you're under CRP contract, is what I was told.
Okay. I'll check on that. We'll see what we can do.
Any chance small farmers or small people can band together so that the forestry department will come out to take care of the southwest corner of Decatur County as one unit rather than small individual units?
That is a suggestion, and I'll have to ask somebody who's a lot more, not smarter than I am on that, if that's a possibility.
Yeah, I mean that, as far as if the question is regarding to be able to salvage the wood, is that the basics?
To be able to salvage the wood,
Right.
can the small landowners band together in specific areas so that it makes it less expensive and more profitable
Right.
for the timber companies to come in?
Absolutely. I mean, that would help. And, I'm trying to think, that would be at this point something that you would do as an individual, is get together with neighbors and pull together larger quantities of wood. And at that point you become a big tract. And that's, that would help you to be able to get it salvaged for sure.
So that's an individual job.
At this point, yes, ma'am. It would be you working with your neighbors. And that's a good thing to do.
If I could, I just want to follow up on that. We told you when we started out we were going to shoot straight with you. There's been a lot of conversations since the storm came through within the forestry sector about what the dynamics are. There was a group of us that met just a couple of days ago in Valdosta and sat down with our counterparts from the Florida Forestry Commission, the state forestry associations in each state, the mill sector, the logger sector, the transportation sector. I think, folks, we've got to all remember the number that Scott shared, because for a lot of us, acreage numbers sort of blur, tonnage numbers sort of blur. Remember the number that Scott shared with you in Georgia, over 700,000 log truck loads of wood basically either were damaged or destroyed in that 2 or 3 hour period when the hurricane came through. Just to the south of us, Florida's devastation, quite honestly, makes ours pale in comparison. The Florida damage is estimated at somewhere around 2.3 million truckloads of wood. They had mill damage, so there's already discussions going between Georgia and Florida to a great extent, and Alabama to a lesser extent, about the movement of wood across state lines, trucking issues, weight issues, and whatnot. But the fact is, between Georgia and Florida, there's 3 million truckloads of wood that the clock is ticking on that needs to find a home. We all know that, generally speaking, the timber industry, the forest industry, sort of finds an equilibrium point. There's X amount of wood in normal times that needs to leave the woods. There's a certain logging capacity to log it. There's a certain transportation capacity to move it. There's a certain mill capacity to process it. There's just no way that system is set up in Georgia and Florida to account for 3 million truckloads of additional wood that the clock is ticking on. Y'all may get up and walk out now and say, Williams, if that's the best you and the Forestry Commission can do, we're going to go back to the farm. But we want to shoot straight with you. That is the dynamic that you and we are dealing with. And as somebody said, conventional answers are not going to deal with the questions that we're facing. So whether it is landowners trying to come together to get the interest maybe of a consultant and his logger team to look at it might be an option. If you think about it, people have said, well, can't we bring loggers in from other parts of the country? Well, those loggers are supplying a supply chain now, whether they're in Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, wherever, that they're not going to walk away from. Our Georgia loggers wouldn't leave Georgia to go out there and leave you as landowners hanging. So the fact is, we're dealing with a significant challenge. And to sort of cut to the chase, and we've got other presentations, and we're going to share those with you. But at the end of the day, I think we all just have to accept what looks to be the fact, unless somebody can figure out a way that we can get some of this wood, instead of having to move down the road by truck, that we can figure out a way to move a volume of it by rail and maybe move it out of a Florida port to another part of the country. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to harvest it, transport it, or process it in the time that it takes to do that, and the products still have value. So with that, I'm going to get off my soapbox, but I'm just going to tell you that we're going to shoot straight with you. And we're going to tell you, as the Georgia Forestry Commission, that's the way we see it. Let me remind you that our core constituency in the state of Georgia is the small, private, non-industrial landowner. So you folks that are talking about as small landowners, is any hope for us? that is really what we as an agency exist for, is to work with the small private and non-industrial landowners. So that is our focus. It will continue to be our focus. And if we find rabbits in the hat, we're going to pull them out and share them with you. But our goal today is to be realistic and just share with you as best we can the dynamics that we see to help you make some tough decisions in a difficult circumstance. So are we still on Q&A for Dr. Dickens? I think I saw a hand somewhere back here.
You kind of hit on it. I was curious about the absorption rate in our area versus the inventory of wood that could be sold there. And one other question is, you know, I get my wood pretty damn cheap if you get it out of it. And so does that mean somebody north of Atlanta might want to be interested in my wood?
I'm going to talk about absorption rate to some extent.
Yeah, we will have a section in a few minutes on markets and absorption. We will have a section in a few minutes on markets and wood absorption, whatnot. Hopefully we'll address it there. If not, remind us.
If you go with him in the back, and then you, and then you. Okay, go ahead.